And for the first time tonight, the guilt Savannah says she feels if her mother was targeted because of Savannah's high-profile job, and what Savannah says about the ransom messages received by the family.
A stalker obsessed with destroying Savannah Guthrie's life. You see, where a professional kidnapping is a sprint, this was a marathon. If you're a pro looking for a payout, you're in and out of that house in under 5 minutes. We're talking grab the target, avoid the sensors, and disappear before the neighbors even roll over in bed. But the forensic data from Nancy's home tells a much more disturbing story. After the Google Nest camera was killed at 1:47 a.m., the suspect didn't flee. He stayed inside for a disturbing 40 minutes. Think about that. 40 minutes in the dark with an 84-year-old woman is an eternity. He was there for Nancy, but he was also there to inhabit the world of a family he had spent years studying from the outside. To a stalker, the risk of being caught is secondary to the high of finally standing where they aren't supposed to be. 40 minutes of forensic exposure that no professional would ever risk, unless the risk was the point. When the ransom notes started hitting TMZ at local newsrooms, investigators didn't see a professional extortionist. They saw a desperate bid for relevance. These weren't private high-stakes negotiations with the Guthrie family. They were public performances. Jim Clement, a veteran FBI profiler, pointed out that the financial demands for cryptocurrency quickly fizzled out. One of those deadlines passed on February 9th and 10th. The communication went cold. In a real kidnapping for profit, the money is the only goal. When that motive evaporates, you're left with what the FBI calls a dark motive. This was never about a bank transfer as much as it was about the suspect inserting himself into Savannah Guthrie's world. The cash was in question, sure, but what he really wanted was the control that comes with being the architect of a family's nightmare. The notes were just a distraction from his true objective, inflicting maximum psychological damage. When the demand for cash stops, the demand for suffering begins. The FBI isn't looking for a career criminal anymore. They're looking for a fan who lost his grip on reality. This is the automatic stalker profile, someone who has spent years constructing a one-sided delusional relationship with Savannah Guthrie. To this predator, Savannah isn't a news anchor. She's a person who owes him something. This isn't a business transaction, it's a possession. Nancy Guthrie, at 84 years old and dependent on a pacemaker, was simply the most accessible way for him to bridge the gap between his fantasy and her real life. He didn't take her because she was valuable. He took her because she belonged to the person he believes he owns. Every detail of his plan, from the specific timing to the targeted location, suggests a mind that has been orbiting this family for a very long time. He didn't break into a house. He broke into a fantasy he'd been rehearsing for years. When former FBI profile Mary Ellen O'Toole reviewed the porch footage, she didn't see a panicked intruder. She saw a man who felt right at home. The suspect moved through Nancy's front porch with an eerie level of familiarity, navigating around potted plants and blind spots as if he'd walked that path 100 times. He wasn't searching for the camera, he knew exactly where it was. But this is where the professional facade cracks. Despite dressing in a 25-liter Ozark Trail backpack and gloves to mask his forensic trail, he botched the execution. He tried to knock the doorbell camera off the wall, failed, and then clumsily tried to cover the lens with the leaves. In his haste, he left his mouth partially uncovered and exposed a visible tattoo now being enhanced by federal labs. It's the classic hallmark of a stalker, someone who has rehearsed the crime 1,000 times in his head, but chokes when faced with physical reality. He had the clothing of a pro, but the execution of a man drowning in his own adrenaline. The FBI isn't just looking for a shadow in a mask. They're auditing Nancy's past service calls. Profilers like Jim Clement believe the suspect didn't stumble upon this house by accident. He had a legitimate reason to be there. Whether it was plumbing, electrical work, pool cleaning, or a simple Uber delivery, someone had an opportunity to observe that an 84-year-old woman lived alone and unprotected. This is how a stalker transitions from digital obsession to physical reconnaissance. They don't need to pick a lock if they've already been inside to check the thermostat or drop off a package. A quick visit is all it takes to map out the cameras and verify that Nancy's mobility was limited. It turns a hard target into an easy one. The most terrifying realization for investigators is that the person who took her didn't need to jump a fence. The predator wasn't hiding in the bushes. He might have been handed a glass of water by Nancy months ago.
Much of the investigation has been under a microscope, and now there's a lot of focus on Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos over his handling of the investigation and for resume discrepancies.
On February 10th, the same day the surveillance footage went public, the Pima County Sheriff's Department detained Carlos Palazuelos. Living an hour away in Rio Rico, Palazuelos didn't just match the profile of someone with geographical access. He was a delivery driver in Tucson who admitted he might have previously dropped a package at Nancy's door. This is exactly where the FBI's stalker lens starts to focus. A delivery driver has the ultimate legitimate reason to linger, to note the security cameras, and to confirm that an 84-year-old woman lives alone. Although investigators questioned him for hours and eventually released him without charges, his background remains the gold standard for this suspect profile. In a behavioral analysis, cleared often just means the physical evidence hasn't caught up to the suspicion yet. Whether it's Palazuelos or someone with an identical routine, the FBI isn't letting go of the service worker connection. Being cleared by the local police is a far cry from being off the FBI's behavioral map.
Well, I think the most hopeful thing, Lawrence, is the information about the 2 dates. Now, we don't know what that indicates, obviously, but the most hopeful read on it is that they're looking at somebody. And they're trying to place that person or persons in the vicinity at that hour on those dates to see if, in fact, they can begin to work backwards from that. Less hopeful is, let's say they have something in the forensics, likely the digital forensics, either something from the camera or something from the cell towers that shows some kind of unusual activity that they're trying to hone in on. Also could be a good lead.
The reward for Nancy Guthrie's recovery has skyrocketed to $1.2 million. And according to former FBI agent Maureen O'Connell, that money is turning this investigation into a pressure cooker. O'Connell believes that despite the lone stalker theory, it's highly likely more than one person knows exactly where Nancy is. When you have multiple people involved in a crime of this magnitude, the math changes the moment 7 figures are on the table. She describes the suspect as being in an air fryer. The heat is rising, the FBI is closing in, and everyone is waiting to see who jumps out first to save their own skin. In criminal psychology, loyalty among amateurs is a fragile thing. A $1.2 million incentive turns partners into liabilities overnight. One phone call could end the entire nightmare, and with that much cash at stake, the silence is starting to crack. A secret is only safe until it's worth $1 million to tell it. The FBI is hunting for a DNA match, but they're also focused on the person who noticed a shift in the suspect's baseline. Every stalker broadcasts their intent through pre-offense behaviors long before the actual abduction. Profilers like Jim Clement know a man fixated on Savannah Guthrie likely spent months obsessed with her broadcasts, asking strange questions about Tucson or documenting her family's movements. He lives in the real world as a weird coworker, a roommate who suddenly went silent, or an ex-boyfriend whose routine vanished overnight. These mood swings and fixations are documented in his social circle, and with $1.2 million on the table, those memories are now a massive liability. A man this obsessed doesn't stay quiet. He talks too much about the Guthries, he checks the news often too, and he disappears at odd hours. The FBI is waiting for one person who realized their odd friend stopped acting like a functioning human being. If $1.2 million and a forensic profile are already on the table, how much longer can a secret this big actually stay hidden? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.